This episode of Back to the Roots podcast, Regional Farmer Updates, is brought to you by Soil Biotics. Soil Biotics Organic 1R seed treatment is an easy-to-use standalone seed treatment that is compatible with most other organic seed treatments and may be applied up to 5 months prior to use. It is formulated to improve the early stages of plant life, reducing insect and disease pressure for better plant health and improved yields. Soil Biotics New Seed Start 200 is a recent addition to our lineup that contains a unique combination of humic acid with living, breathing microorganisms designed to boost plant and soil microbial activity. This product has performed quite well in multi-state seed treatment trials. Visit soilbiotics.com. This episode is also brought to you by Byron Seeds. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, and commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems on the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 1-800-801-3596. So today we are joined with one of a new farmer for the... Okay, so that muss ich stoppen. Hang on.
Okay.
Okay. Brian must set it as editor. Brian, edit all this out. You're listening to the Regional Farmer Updates, and today I am joined by a new farmer who will be joining us to give the updates in 2021. We are joined by Marlin Eash from Shipshewana, Indiana. He is an Amish dairy farmer, and he is on here to give us a little bit of a background on his farm. So Marlin, how are you today?
Good. So again, I'm Marlin, and me and my wife Doris have 8 children, ages 2 months to 18 years old. And I guess before we go further, I am 42 and my wife is 39. And we live in LaGrange County, and I think LaGrange County has the most certified organic farms in the state, if not in the nation. So we're blessed with a lot of farmers in our community. We live approximately 100 miles east from the southern tip of Lake Michigan, which brings us high humidity in the summer. Our topography is hilly to rolling to flat. And our soils are sandy loam mixed in with some heavy clay areas along with some muck soils. So that's our general area that we live in. Our particular farm is approximately 100 tillable acres. We have soils ranging from sandy loam to muck. And as far as our crops are concerned, we have 40 acres in grass. The balance is in a rotation of grazing annuals such as sorghum sudan and turnips, along with some corn for corn silage and ear corn, and then another 30 acres of grass alfalfa. Our particular farm we are the 3rd generation on our farm. As far as the cows are concerned, we have 50 cows. They are bred for bi-seasonal, so we freshen half the herd in the spring, the other half in the fall. This allows us to milk more cows than we have room for as far as freestalls is concerned. And our setup, by the way, is a freestall / parlor setup. And so with the bi-seasonal setup, we like this. One of the advantages is we can milk more cows in the spring and in the fall due to weather that is favorable and so we don't necessarily need all the room to house that many cows. So we can milk up to 50 cows and have only room for 40. Our farm is a third-generation farm. Grandpa bought the farm in 1941. He bought it out of a foreclosure situation, which equals poor conditions of the soils and the buildings. Grandpa was very industrious, was very energetic. He rebuilt all the buildings and the soils and basically laid the foundation that I have today, and one of my goals is to maintain and improve upon that foundation. So in 2004, I assumed the management from my dad. I bought his herd of 17 cows and supporting young stock. And we've been able to build our herd up to 50 cows basically from within the herd. I think we bought 7 outside cows in our lifetime of farming here. But anyway, the farm itself was equity rich and cash poor at the time, and so that we were struggling from the onset. We immediately utilized rotational grazing with excellent results. And just going through the years here, in 2006 we had a banner year here on the farm. We began transitioning to organic, which was exciting in itself. We also built our milking parlor, which began a dark and trying 3-year journey through the bankrupting story of stray voltage issues. Won't go into further detail on that except to say that the farm, at one point in time, the farm was probably 6 months close to being totally bankrupt, and I, as the manager, was not even aware of how close we were to that. So moving along, in the same year, my brother, who lived close to me, just off the farm, was near and dear to me. He was killed in an auto accident, and so moving along in 2008, we built a poultry barn for a local poultry company, and that was due in part to the fact that his now widowed wife was helping me on the farm. The farm itself did not have the cash flow to support 2 families, and so we built this poultry barn to increase cash flow and just build diversity for the farm. Has been a win-win situation. So I guess in that particular situation, we were able to take the lemons that life dealt us, and we made lemonade with that. It has been an excellent situation that at one point in time was very dark. Throughout the years, we've tried to increase production on our farm by tiling some of our low-lying muck areas, which has increased our land base quite a bit, has increased profitability, and has increased diversity as far as soils are concerned. And so on my particular farm, there's usually some spot on the farm that something is growing well. In a wet year, it's the sandy soils that are doing well. In a dry year, it's the muck soils. So we are blessed with diversity all the way around on our farm.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Marlin. It's really interesting. I find it fascinating, the backstories on these farms and how, through the generations, and it's really good to hear that your grandpa put the work in to not only rebuild the buildings, but to start at the soils, and to hear you wanting to pass that on it's exciting.
One thing I do want to add here, if we can fit this in, going back to the herd, we are spring and fall seasonal. These cows are Friesian cows, Friesian Holsteins, and the heifers, as 6-month-old calves, leave the farm and they are contracted out to a custom grower, and then they return at approximately 22 months old as springing heifers ready to enter the milking herd. And that has really increased profitability on the farm. Just simply, I've got someone else who's watching those animals, taking excellent care of them, better than I ever could, as a matter of fact. And they're coming into the milking string ready to milk, and it's been another win-win situation for us.
Mm-hmm. So did you, 2020, was that a good crop year for you?
2020 was a good crop year from the standpoint of quality feed. We've got excellent quality feed on hand. The quantity is just way off. So if you mix the two together, I'd say it's been a average year. Average year.
Is your production pretty good this winter on that feed?
Yes, it is. We are breaking all sorts of production records this fall. We had just to back up here, we had a dry August and September, and did not look good going into the fall. However, the fall was warm and sunny, and the feed that we did have left over for grazing anyway was excellent quality feed. Our fall freshening cows came in, they peaked well, and they're still milking well. So this winter, as far as milk production goes, as far as components go, as far as quality goes, it's been excellent. It's been fun. It's been fun.
I've been seeing the same thing here in Ohio, where actually the haulers are adding routes for the first time this time of year. So it's that high quality forage, especially on the grass milk carts, but that high quality forage is turning into milk this winter, it's exciting to see the farmers having a good winter.
It is. It's really right now. I've said this before, and that is, things are going so well, and dairy farming right now is so fun. I'm almost afraid to blink because I'm afraid it's going to go away.
Well, that is really good to hear, and I want to thank you for joining me today, and I want to thank you in advance for doing these updates throughout the year, and I really look forward to talking to you. It'll be in March to kind of wrap up the winter months. So it's good to hear it's going good, and thanks for being on.
You're welcome.
Today I am joined by Eric Beiler, a dairy farmer in Croghan, New York, who will be on our regional updates this year. Thanks a lot for taking the time to do this, Eric. I'm really excited to hear what life is like in upstate New York, where they get all the snow. So can you give us a little bit of your history and a little bit of history on the farm that you're on now?
Sure, Mike. Croghan, New York's a small town just outside the Adirondacks. We're about an hour and a half from Canada in upstate New York, what they call the North Country. Most of New York calls this the North Country. We do get a lot of snow. We're off the Tug Hill Plateau, and so air comes across and picks up moisture from the lakes, and then the plateau comes across the plateau and dumps a lot of snow on the plateau and on us as well. So there's quite a few small family-sized dairies in this area, though there's a lot less than when I first moved up here. I grew up here, moved up from Lancaster, Pennsylvania when I was 6 years old, but then left the area for about 20 years for college, and then worked on a couple different farms. In May of 2019, my wife and I decided to chase a dream that I had had for a long time and purchased the cows and equipment on a 90-cow dairy. And we have plans to buy the real estate also, have a purchase agreement and all that worked out. That just has to happen down the road a little bit once we're in a better financial position. So we're not too far from where I grew up in my family, which was kind of the goal if we were going to farm, because we knew we wouldn't be able to travel too much. And then a little bit of my history. So I was born and raised on about a 100-cow dairy in this area. We were just a conventional dairy, pretty high production dairy. We had a custom harvesting business growing up on my home farm. And from the time I was really young, I really enjoyed the farm. I was always out on the farm with my dad and my mom also. And got more into the equipment than I did the cows when I was younger, but I've kind of taken more of an interest in the cows in my later years. So following high school, I went to Berea College, which is a small little liberal arts school in Lexington, just south of Lexington, Kentucky, and studied sustainable agriculture and industrial tech management. And there was a key individual there at that school, Dr. Mike Pansiera, who was both a professor and a mentor. And he's the first one that kind of started pointing me towards grazing and getting my interest in both grazing and organics. He was just challenging me with different questions through the years. I remember numerous meetings in his office. He was just kind of probing the way I thought of agriculture and dairy farming, and so my head was turning, and my interest grew through those years in school, and did a little bit of research on some cropping systems, organic versus conventional, in school on a trip that we had taken to Costa Rica, and so my interest just started growing in the sustainable ag movement. But that's pretty much what it was. It was an interest. I didn't have a lot of hands-on experience of grazing or that side of ag, or the organic or sustainable ag, until I got married. So after college, I worked carpentry for a couple years with a home builder just to learn the trade. I had moved back to the North Country for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then moved to Pennsylvania when I got married as my wife was finishing up school. And just got introduced to an Organic Valley farmer, and he was looking for someone to work on his dairy because his son had left for a while. And so I joined him on a New Zealand-style grazing dairy, and he was a seasonal dairy also. And immediately, kind of my interest in dairy farming, and I was always interested in dairy farming. I always thought I would eventually farm, but the amount of commitment it takes to have your own farm was not something I was ready to tackle right after school. So I should give you a little backstory too on my home farm. So my home farm continued through college and everything. When I left, my dad hired an extra person and went to 3 times a day to both have the extra hours of work for that person and to create the extra income. And I just remember pretty clearly, going back in the summers and the 3 times a day thing, the high production, it just wasn't as enjoyable to me as when we were twice a day and the cows were out in the summer. I just spent a lot of time in the barn. And so when I got on this grazing farm, I've always been an outdoorsman. I love to hike, I love to camp, canoe. And so when I started working for this grazer, this Organic Valley farmer, I was just outside a lot, and it just refueled my interest to farm and to have our own dairy. So, and I knew how I wanted to do it at that point. After a year of being there, I knew that I wanted to be grazing, and I just love spending that much time outside. Some days I seriously felt like I just went outside and hiked all day as I made fence. So it was a lot of fun to me. And then also just being part of the whole sustainable ag movement with Organic Valley and all the energy behind the co-op and the organic dairy movement, it was just energizing. I had come from an area where there's a lot of conventional dairymen that were, starting to feel pinched as small farms and struggling, and some were complaining because it's getting tough, and so to hear so much energy behind what everybody was doing was just neat. So anyway, we stayed. I worked for Dave and Dave Johnson, and his son Caleb also worked on the farm in the northern tier of Pennsylvania. I worked for them about 5 years, and then we were getting ready to start a family, and so we wanted my wife to be able to stay home, and so we needed something with a little more income. And so I took a job with Alfred State College, and I started their organic robot dairy in Alfred, New York, which is in the southern tier of New York. So that was about a year I stayed there, got the dairy up and rolling, got the robot rolling. Didn't really enjoy the politics of the job, and so decided I was going to move on. And during my time there, a dairyman who lived about 5 miles away, he had a 2-robot dairy, about 120 cows. He had talked to me about an opportunity of working with them, and he was kind of a poster child for Horizon. So I went down the road just not far at all from where I had taken the job with Alfred State College and worked for Willow Creek Farm for 4 years. And then, again, we hit a point in that journey where I was starting to feel, I was obviously getting older, and I realized, I knew by the time I was 40, I wanted to own a farm if I was going to do it. And so we knew we had to start looking, and he wasn't ready to do anything on that farm. He had, kids that hadn't decided what they're doing yet. I can't blame him. And so we looked around at farms, weren't able to do anything right away. So I worked for Organic Valley for a couple years, and then ended up Croghan, And I thought when I worked with Organic Valley, okay, this is a great job. I'll keep doing this if we don't find a farm, and if we find a farm, then we'll jump off and follow that dream. So we found this farm up in Croghan. Hopefully it's going to be a good grazing farm. We have about 90 acres right behind the barn with a river that runs along the back of the property, which we're hoping at times to irrigate out of and have irrigated paddocks behind the barn. We do have sandy soil, so that's a bit challenging at times to work with, more challenging than I anticipated, really, but we're learning. And so we're milking just over 90 cows now. We're, 105 total. And we have started our organic transition soon after I came up. July of the first year, so we started in May, and July we stopped using any prohibited substances on the land. So we are over a year into our land transition, and we're hoping that a market will be available by the time we get there with our land. So that's where we're at now. We're trying to survive and do the best we can in a conventional system. It's challenging with the market the way it's been, and but we're pretty set on trying to start grazing and get the farm transitioned. Just because that's the way we'd like to farm.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting background and story to lead you to today. And I always think it's kind of interesting how it's hard to get rid of that passion for dairy if you grew up on a dairy farm. I know I still have it, but for me to buy a farm in an area where the land's $60,000 an acre is really not an option. So I applaud you, and I'm excited for you, and hopefully you will be shipping organic milk here in a couple years.
I sure hope so. And I agree with you, Mike. It is, there's been times where I wanted to be able to just let the dream go, because I said, why can't I just enjoy a normal job like normal people? I told my wife that, because it's just this thing that won't leave,
Mm-hmm.
But it is fun, but it's tiring at times too. You see and work with farmers all the time, and we're exhausted sometimes. So.
How was your cropping year in 2020?
2020 was great for corn, which we do some corn silage. It was a really poor hay year. I bought a lot of feed this year. I had only 35 bales of second cutting, and I didn't have much third either. So pretty much I had a decent first cutting, but I'm pretty much buying second and third cutting haylage. So a lot of guys ran short on hay, and hay is expensive too this year. So
you were dry?
We were really dry, yeah. And on sandy ground, it's worse yet, so we dry out pretty quick.
Yeah, the one thing you mentioned is you've got a river running through your farm. Is that salmon fishing?
It's not salmon fishing. There's some, no, the salmon fishing is a little bit south of us mostly, in the Pulaski area. In this, there's just what they call bullheads, and there's some bass in there too.
Okay, because I thought I just found a connection to go salmon fishing.
Well, the connection's here, but you just might have to go to Pulaski to do it. It's only an hour and a half.
So how has your production been? The feed quality that you had, I'm guessing, even though the quantity was down, the quality was probably good. So how's your production been this winter?
My production's been pretty good. I think, I question sometimes whether I'm buying some of that production too, just with grain and purchase feed. But it always seems easier to pay my bills when they are milking well. And we are milking quite a bit because we're trying to make it in a conventional dairy pay price, with a conventional dairy pay price, until we can hopefully get on the organic truck. And it was also, I didn't mention either, it was my first year cultivating corn. And I did recently hire my cousin, but I didn't have much help through the first year, year and a half. My niece was helping part-time, but no one that could cultivate or that I could send out and do that kind of stuff. So I was challenged to get out there from a timing standpoint. I didn't hit it quite early enough. Thankfully, I've been in touch with some farmer friends that are, have done this for a long time, and they're they're telling me where I'm going wrong, and I'm taking pictures and sending them to them. And so that's been a huge help, like just the network of organic farmers that I've built through the years to use as a resource and to keep you from getting too discouraged when you see all those weeds coming. But so I did have I had some decent corn, and then I had some corn that wasn't as good either that definitely had some weed pressure. So that's going to definitely affect my production a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Are you milking Holsteins?
We are. Primarily Holsteins. I do have some linebacks, have some belteds and a round Swiss too, but mostly Holsteins and a few linebacks. The linebacks are pretty compatible with my cows, size-wise, production-wise, and I like the way they look, so I keep breeding some.
I really am excited to hear your updates this year, and I just want to thank you again for making the commitment. But I think it's going to be really interesting going from where you are in upstate New York to Chris Hoffner in North Carolina, simply because of the contrasts and the heat versus the winter. So I'm really looking forward to your reports, and we'll be back in touch in March to see how the rest of the winter is going. But I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Eric.
Sounds good, Mike. Glad I can.
Today I'm joined by Chris Hoffner, a dairy farmer in North Carolina, who will be on our regional updates this year. Thanks for taking the time to do this, Chris. I really appreciate it. And can you start off our first episode here with just a little bit of history on your farm?
Sure, I can. I really appreciate you giving me a call, and we will give you a little bit of introduction of what's going on here. So this farm, my grandpa purchased it in 1956. I'm the third generation here on this farm. We've always been farming. My great-grandpa, everybody's been farming. So I purchased the dairy from my dad in, I think, 2003. And then we transitioned over to organics. I think we got certified in 2007 or 2008. Been with Organic Valley since then, and things have done relatively well with us. We're farming about 800 acres, and that's counting grass and cropland. We do as much no-till as what we can. We use a lot of compost. And when we first started into the organics, we were using a lot of chicken litter. And we've got our P&Ks at a great spot in our soils, and now we're looking more at, just increasing fertility and making the land do its thing, let microbes do its work. And it's been amazing how to watch things grow without putting a bunch of junk on it. So it's been pretty neat. And we milk around, we'll get up to about 140 cows in the spring. We're more of a fall, winter calving. We calve year round, but that's when we really push for our cows to calve. Try to get the $3 up for winter time and have them milking for spring when the grass finally gets here. We're pretty optimistic and ready for the grass to grow. I'll tell you that. It's been a little bit of a muddy year this year, and this winter's it's not been too bad on cold. We've only had a few days. It's been, down in the teens, but we've had a lot of rain, and we have a lot of mud, but it'll soon dry up. It'll be July. We'll be looking for rain. So that's kind of what we got going on here. I have one full-time guy that works for us. My dad's still here at the dairy, and we're extremely busy all the time. We normally would like to say we're not as busy in the winter, but I can't ever seem to get any time off, and but we do every once in a while. We went up to my son and myself went to Wisconsin for deer season, and that went well. Hunted with the Iams and hunted with Jeremy Mathis for a bit. That was pretty entertaining, and we did well up there. And that's the way I like to get out of town to do things. But anyway, you got any questions for me, Mike?
Well, I was just wondering how was 2020 as a farming year down there? I know Sam Dobson was on the regional updates last year, but he's a ways north of you and at a higher elevation as well, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and he, they are definitely a few degrees cooler than we are. But 2020's been it's been all over the place, to be honest. Luckily, we've had rain. This has been one of the wettest years on record, but also one of the hottest. We did very well with our crops. We started grazing last year. We were grazing, I believe it was first week of January, and grazed on and off until, we grazed on and off till about November. So we had a really good grazing season last year. This year, as I said, we're just waiting on it. And but as far as 2020, we did well on our grazing. Corn did well. We chopped all of ours, but if we were to pick, we would have been in the 150s to 180. We normally can say we would do 100 bushel corn. But we did well on it. We grew some double crop corn mixed with sorghum this year. That did phenomenal. We chopped it, and it was around 25 tons. It's just had to have the weather just hit just correct, and it did well. This fall, we've got all of our grazing stuff in. We've got a lot of cover crops in, but we tried to plant barley, and we just kept on getting rained out. And it got too late to plant the barley. We had to do a preventative planting on our crop insurance, and really didn't want to do that, but that's what we did this year on some barley land. But besides that, it's went relatively well. As far as the cows milking, I think, because we did have so much rain, I don't think our quality of feed is where it needs to be. We've got a lot of it, but it's just not the quality. Our cows personally are not making the milk that we would like them to be making. I don't believe they're where they were last year at this time. But like I said, we're not having to buy a lot of feed, or a lot of forages. So, it all works out. It all comes out in the end, and it'll all average out. So I'm sure next year, since we had rain this year, 21 will probably be dry. So we just gotta keep on going forward and make it work. So.
Do you have any irrigated ground?
Yes. So Grandpa and Dad, back in the 80s, they spent a lot of money on infrastructure for irrigation. Pretty much all the land that we own here on the dairy and surrounding areas, even a lot of land we lease, has underground irrigation lines, 6-inch or 8-inch lines going out to it. We're pulling water out of the creeks, and we can irrigate the whole place. I would like to use more center pivots or drip irrigation, but we've been running hard hoses. It is a little bit of time-consuming and not as efficient as a center pivot would be, but center pivots are pretty expensive. And I believe in the next couple of years I'll have a couple of those put up. So we're pretty fortunate on that and all, but it is definitely just another job. So
yeah, does the irrigation help you with your summer heat, like the July and August?
Well, we have done it with the cows and the grass on the pasture. We have had the irrigation running at the same time. As far as the heat with the cow part is kind of, I don't really know whether it helps. I think putting a pivot up in a pasture and putting sprinklers on the pivots with the cows under them while the water is running, cows are grazing underneath it, I think there's something to that. Maybe graze some Sudex under it. I think there's something to that. As far as the heat, no. But it does help on our corn and even the alfalfa. If we're putting water on it, it drops the temperature of the corn a little bit. And you can really see the difference when we're dumping water on corn and alfalfa. That's where to make the money up.
And the corn that you raised, that was all irrigated?
No, not this year. Not this year. We had plenty of rain. We didn't even we didn't even turn it on this year. We were really fortunate. Every time it started getting dry, we started getting irrigation stuff out, started working on it, and then it would rain. And I'm like, hey, this is awesome. So it'd get a little dry, we get irrigation, start messing with it, and then it would rain. So I'm like, I'm just going to start taking up donations from the neighbors around here so I can get my irrigation stuff out and start, because it was pretty cool. Every time it would just a little dry spell, we'd start bringing out irrigation stuff or working on equipment, and it would rain. So it was pretty awesome this year. So hopefully we can keep that up.
Now, is that that would not have been a normal year last year as far as rainfall?
Absolutely not. No, it was great. No, we're normally dry starting. It just really depends on the year, but starting around June and up into August, September, and normally in August, September we'll have a couple of hurricanes or the tropical depressions or something of that sort, and that's where most of our water comes from in the fall. And so that's kind of, this year we had a lot of rain this summer. Did well.
Good deal. So now,
Yep.
with all the moisture you have this winter, that should help you in the spring, though, shouldn't it?
That's the theory. Yeah. If the cows don't trump up the pastures real bad. So, but yeah, it'll help out early spring and all, and it'll definitely help. We're not complaining about the rain. I don't, that's one thing you don't want to do in North Carolina is complain about the rain, but we just, are not as happy with the mud. Maybe that's the way I should be putting it. So, but we're never happy. So, but we're grateful for what we get.
Mm-hmm. Now, when do you normally hit grass in the spring?
So I'm always doing the math. Beginning of March, I would like to be going out a little bit, to get a little bit of grass beginning of March. But our normal gun-ho grass is growing like crazy fast is the first week of April to April 15th. That is like, we can't keep up with the grass. Hopefully we'll have the disbine running last week of April, first week of May. Hopefully I'll be putting some ryegrass and Beilage at that time. That's when our prime feed is, that really early pre-boot, really prime ryegrass, and that's when we try to make it right there, that early stuff. That's where our best forages will come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I always find it interesting in the South, like in North Carolina and even further south, how you deal with heat and we deal with winter. So I'm really excited to get your reports going through the year, and I'll be looking forward to hearing from you in March. So, hey, Chris, I appreciate you taking the time to give me an update.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. And I'm probably not going to do as good a job as Sam Dobson. Sam Dobson's the best. If you don't believe me, ask him. He will tell you he's the best. So, I will try to do the best I can to compare to Sam Dobson.
Oh, I can't wait to tell Sam that.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate
Thank you a
it.
bunch.
So today I am joined by Corby Groen from Lynden, Washington. He's a dairy farmer and will be one of our regional updates this year. Thanks for taking the time today, Corby. I appreciate you doing this, and I'm excited for your reports throughout the year. So can you start off with a little bit of history of your farm?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this. And I farm in Lynden, Washington, which is up in the northwest corner of Washington. I'm about 6 or 7 miles from the ocean and 2 or 3 miles from the Canadian border. So tucked right up in the corner. It's actually really hilly ground where I'm at. Most of the area is actually pretty flat, and where most of the dairies in this area is flat. I'm one of the last farms, or the last farm in the hilly area. So farm a lot of hilly ground. My grandpa bought the farm in 1956 when he got home from World War II, and he was a little later in life. He ended up passing it down to my dad or selling the farm to my dad somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s. And then in 2008, when I graduated from college, I came home and I bought my dad's cows, and I rent the farm from him. Still to this day, I'm milking around 90 cows, run between 90 and 100 depending on the time of year, and mostly Jerseys. Our home farm is 128 acres. It's probably 70 farmable. A lot of it's woodlands and wetlands. We've kind of pastured as long as I can remember, and rotationally grazed the cows. My dad was big into grazing from the get-go. Made the switch to organic and Organic Valley in 2016. We feed most of our own feed. There are times that we run out depending on the year, and then I'll buy alfalfa that comes from across the mountains in eastern Washington.
So you are about as far northwest as you can get in the United States, I see.
Yep.
And there are quite a few organic farmers in that area?
There are, in our county, there are 4 organic dairy farmers, and 3 of them Organic Valley.
Okay.
And then the county below us, I think there's 5 or 6. And then so to the east of us is just straight mountains, right? So there's nothing up there. It's foothills, and then it goes straight up to the Cascade Mountains. So then there's some farms on eastern Washington too, but that's quite a drive.
Mm-hmm. Now, how far north of Seattle would you be?
About 100 miles.
I'm just trying to figure out if I flew into Seattle, how long it would take me to drive to your farm.
Yeah, it's not too long, probably an hour and 40 minutes or so, depends on traffic.
Mm-hmm. I would love to come out there sometime and see the farms out there. I've always been intrigued with the climate and everything. So, talking about grazing, when does your grazing season generally start, and when does it finish?
It's depending on the year, but I'd say usually I'm out or in that first week of May, and I kind of like that time too, because if I let them out much earlier than that, sometimes we just get, all of a sudden it'll be 2 weeks of rain and 37 degrees, and the grass kind of stops growing. So you end up going through your rotation, and you got to bring them back in or supplement a lot of feed, or they mud it up. So that's kind of when I try to get them out. And I think over the years that's kind of changed with the climate has changed. I remember my dad getting the cows out in March, in early April a lot of times, but just the last 4 or 5 years, that seems to be kind of when I get them out. And then I usually have them in by Thanksgiving. That's pretty standard usually. Usually, there's a time in August and September where I have to supplement pretty hard because it dries out. And then we start getting some October rain, and it really comes back nicely again.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny that your grazing season is very similar to here in Ohio, and we're south of Lake Erie, so we're just out of the snow belt, so we deal with a lot of the 30-degree temperatures and mud during the winter.
Yep.
The wet snows. So it's kind of, I find it kind of interesting that our climates are a lot closer alike than I expected.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a wrap that, we get. I don't know what it's like there during the summer, but everybody thinks rain in the Pacific Northwest. But I think our average rainfall here is like 42 inches annually. So it's not really that high, but we just get such a concentration of it in December through February that it just seems like it rains every day all winter long. And then for a few years, about 5 or 6 years ago, we had years where come June 20, we don't see rain again until, mid-August. So a lot of the farms around here rely on irrigation, and I don't have access to a lot of water where I'm at. So I usually can hit some of my pasture once, and then all the other ground that I'm farmed for hay and stuff doesn't get any water, but it needs it. So a lot of guys around here are getting 5-6 cuttings, where I farm a little more ground and get 2 to 3 cuttings.
Mm-hmm. And you have basically the same July, August, summer slump as the Midwest? Hot and dry?
Yeah, I guess. I haven't. Yep, it's hot and dry usually. Now this last year we had really good year. We had a lot of timely rains. It was my best feed year that I've had in probably 6 or 7 years. But there was a few years there it was just really droughty. I mean, it just didn't rain all summer long. I think that's changed over the years. I think as a kid, I remember it being a lot wetter during the summer, getting more rain. A lot of people didn't grow corn around here because it was so cool. And now everybody's growing corn because we get the heat units. And then this year was kind of a rough year for the corn growers because they didn't get quite the heat. So it's interesting how the things change in patterns.
Yeah. Do you raise any corn?
No, I don't.
Okay. But you do feed corn to your cows, though?
I feed a pelleted grain that I buy in the parlor, and that's it. It's 10 to 12 pounds per cow.
We all heard about all the wildfires out there, and John Vance was one of our regional reports last year, and, he could see the fires, around him. You would have been north out of the fires, but did you have, side effects of the smoke and stuff up there?
It wasn't too bad this year where we were at. I think there was a couple days that were a little smoky, if I remember right. In years past where we've had a month of smoke where it just holds the humidity in the air. It makes it tough to make hay. It's just nasty stuff. But this year wasn't so bad where we were at.
So what drove you to go organic? Was that always kind of a mindset with your dad as well, with the grazing? Because you mentioned that he was a grazer. So was organic just kind of a natural evolution for your farm?
Yeah, kind of. I was pretty scared of it at first, though, actually. I was big into registered jerseys, when I was younger. And I just thought, well, what if my cow gets sick? I can't, treat her. And I had been approached by Organic Valley probably 3 or 4 times. And I just never thought I would ever do it. And then I ended up actually starting on our neighbor's place, which was certified organic. He sold his cows. He wasn't actually milking organic cows, but his ground was certified. And I started milking organic cows over there. So I was milking about 80 organic cows at the neighbor's place, and it connected to our place on 3 sides. And then the home place, I was milking 100 or so conventional cows. And that's what kind of being able to start a second farm got me brave enough to do it, because I thought, well, I can, cow gets sick, I can treat her and bring her to the home farm. Well, after 2 years of that, I think I had moved 2 or 3 cows, and I started seeing a lot of the benefits and how much healthier my organic cows were than my conventional cows, even though they were really farmed in the same fashion. But I was, it was just weird. So I ended up kind of becoming a total believer in it, and I switched everything to organic and moved all the cows to the home farm in 2018.
Okay. And did you then drop your numbers down significantly when you were just on the home farm then?
Yeah, I sold the conventional cows and I just kept my...
Okay.
My same
so you didn't transition
80,
any of
cows.
those in?
No.
That's kind of a unique way to do it. You don't hear of many guys starting a second farm, at least in my region, a second farm to see if it works. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it wasn't, and it kind of helped me with the learning curve of a lot of things. Yeah, it was interesting. I wouldn't say I was a believer in organic in itself until I actually saw it in person and saw it on my own operation.
So you mentioned earlier that you had a really good hay year. Was the crop year in 2020, was it a lot of hay, or was it good quality, or both?
It was both.
And the cows are producing well on that feed, I imagine, this winter?
Yeah, they're doing pretty well. I don't push them hard at all, so I think I'm getting around 35, 36 pounds of milk right now. And that's mostly jerseys. And then I'll get, if I end up buying some alfalfa, they usually milk a lot better on that, but I don't feel I make more money feeding alfalfa, even though I get more milk. So I'm hoping not to have to buy any alfalfa this year and just be able to sustain on my own feed.
Do you ever see a difference in your components when you feed that alfalfa versus grass?
It's not really.
Okay.
Yeah, so I usually never run out of grass silage. So I'll feed the grass silage and then with the alfalfa hay. So what happens is I buy the alfalfa hay when I run out of grass hay, because I like to feed two different things. I don't feed a TMR or anything, so I like to have it's kind of like a buffet. Like they seem to eat more because they go eat a little silage and then you throw some hay down and then they go eat some hay and they seem to milk better. So when I run out of that grass hay, then I'll buy the alfalfa. I usually have plenty of grass silage, so they're still getting a fermented grass product at the same time, and that's probably part of it. I would think the components would go down on the alfalfa, but they've been pretty steady to be in the same.
Yeah. That was my thoughts. Usually when the production goes up like that, you're gonna, generally use a little bit of components, but that's impressive. You would still think it's more profitable to make the less milk on just the grass versus buying that expensive alfalfa,
huh? For me, yeah, and I think everybody's different. Like I have a friend and neighbor that's an organic valley farmer who, I'm not sure how many acres he has, but he just pastures the ground that he has, and then he buys alfalfa for the winter, and it's really not that badly priced. But for me, I have equipment payments and land rent payments and all these things. So anytime you spread all those costs out, they're kind of the same every year, no matter how much feed you made. So on a year you're short, you made all your equipment payments and you made your land rent payments, and then you had to buy your alfalfa. Where this friend of mine, he doesn't have, I think he just has a skid steer and a tractor with a mower for pasture clipping and an irrigation reel, and that's about it. So he doesn't have that overhead that I do. So I think that's a lot of it for me anyways.
Because if you're making the payments, you're hoping to use those payments to make feed.
Right.
So
it really hurts when you don't have a good year.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you had a good feed year, and hopefully you'll have enough to get through winter. 2020's been a weird year, but here in my region as well, they had a great feed year. They're really making milk this fall, so it's really fun when you get to talk to farmers that are production's good, the feed quality is good, and things are kind of going good, especially in a year like 2020. So it's great to hear that things are going well for you too.
Yeah, it's been a good year overall, and that's the thing about being out on the farm. We're just not affected near as much by the pandemic. It's kind of life as usual unless we go into town. So
sure. So, well, hey, I don't want to take more of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and to do these reports, and I'm excited for March. We'll be back in touch and to kind of get an update on the first couple of months. So thanks for taking the time to give me a call today and record this. So I appreciate it.
No problem. Looking forward to it.